The MTI at some point looks over at the squad leader, throws up his hands and goes, are they going to get anything wrong?
And I was so deeply, okay, it's been 11 years now, going on 12 in this season. I'm still deeply offended by that.
Spend all the time studying and don't get asked or get asked a random question?
No. So I'm saying, like, if you going off of just the study packet, I think is way too wide.
We are the people who are fighting for the soul of let's really do regulation, let's really do color guard the way it's intended.
But I think in this case, when the competition very clearly says
what it expects, we should listen the first time.
And when you're doing something and you very clearly get the response of, what are you doing? This is not what we expect to see and this isn't what we want to see, then
you should believe it. We've spent the past 3 years in the lab working to understand the machinations of inspection at the All-Service National High School Drill Team Championships. Now, after research, collaboration, trial, and error, we're ready to tell you exactly how to select your inspection team, how to enter and exit the room, how to practice, and even how to study. We spent nearly a decade paying the ignorance tax so that you don't have to, and we were able to culminate our journey in our final year with the Woodlands College Park High School. What we're about to say is going to sound unorthodox, maybe even outrageous at times, but we're going to do our best to lay everything out there that you need to know. If you don't attend a meet with this inspection schematic, we've tagged the chapters so that you can skip to what might be most helpful, maybe the parts about studying. And some of y'all can skip this entire episode because you don't do inspection in your regions. But for anyone who ends their season in Daytona Beach, this podcast could be the difference between making your 5-figure investment worth it, and we're about to lay it all out there so that you have the best chance of success. All right. Inspection. So, like you just heard in the intro, we're going to tackle this from a couple of different perspectives, give you as much strategy as we possibly can. And for those of you that listen all the way to the end, we will tell you the absolute hack to studying for inspection that'll make it much less painful, I think, for most people. So I guess we should just start with kind of how we arrived, where we arrived, and kind of the decisions that we landed on. That'll just kick us right into the strategy and tips and tricks part of this. I think we thought we knew what we were doing for a long time.
Well, and I think we thought we knew what we were doing for a long time because the teams that we were working with and the teams that were doing kind of whatever we were teaching before this last year were placing.
And it was really exciting because a lot of these times, these are up-and-coming groups. So they go from like 12th place to 5th place. They go from 9th place to 4th place. They go from, whatever to 6th place.
Right. And so you look at those teams that like probably weren't going to win overall, so you're happy with.
Yeah, I mean, that's like a thrilling finish for them, probably the best thing that they could ask for. And so...
And all of this was based off of one singular first place that happened in like 2013, I think.
That's over a decade ago now for those keeping score.
The people on that team, in all honesty, were just very, very good, and that was a very experienced team, and they probably would have won doing anything.
And so I think, we really kind of proceeded from a false premise, and not that it was our fault, but, we were doing the best that we could. And I think the thing that was really the impetus was the realization, we tell the teams all the time, the system you're using is perfectly designed to give you the outcome you're getting. And we looked at it kind of in the aggregate and we're like, holy cow, it's like, okay, maybe the system we're using is perfectly designed to give you about a 5th or 6th place.
And so then what we did is we went and we watched we found videos. Mostly post-COVID, because that's what's most relevant, and a few pre-COVID, like right before COVID happened. And then, we watched those videos, and then we discovered a few things.
And I think that it's really very interesting when we sat down to watch these videos. And, we talked about, again, spending the last 3 years kind of in the lab trying to make this stuff work. And one of the things that we did was we sat down with College Park, with the cadets, and we put these videos on and we asked them, okay, what do you notice? What are the commonalities? And the cool thing was they were able to speak and tell us the very things that we were noticing, which, kind of bad on us for not realizing a lot of these things sooner. But as soon as you start to look at things over time, things start to pop out. So everything that we're about to dive into and that we're about to explain to you, though some of it may seem a little bit weird, it's all kind of designed to help put the team in the right space and have the tools in order to go in and feel really good and really confident. And the first thing, before we dive into any kind of strategy talk, selecting your block or how to practice or whatever, I think the first thing that it's important to think about is how you frame inspection to your cadets.
Indeed.
Right now, inspection it can kind of be this scary thing where, people are going to talk to you loud and ask you questions that you may or may not know. And if you're armed, take your rifles. But I think that, and go back and listen to the older podcasts, because we talk a lot about how this is really military drill theater. And one of the first things that we did when we sat the College Park cadets down was said, hey, listen, this is not going to be hard. This is going to be very straightforward. This is military drill theater, like every other event is military drill theater. But in the case of inspection, it's like one of those dinner murder mysteries where the actors are embedded and you're like interactive with them. And your job is to get into that storyline and get into that, theatrical situation and be a part of it with the judges who are the actors who are embedded in, this interactive experience. And it frames it not as this thing that you are doing, but this thing that you are performing in this situation you're stepping into to play a character in like this interactive drill theater scenario. And I think that's kind of like the premise from which we led with them.
Well, and I think it's not only about framing it correctly, but also making sure that they see that there's going to also be a very scaffolded framework in which they're going to operate in. I think a lot of what makes inspection scary for students is a lot of the studying and basically a lot of how well they do is very much on them. We go places, well, if they don't study, that's on them, right? If they're not good at the rifle manual, they should have spent more time.
If the uniforms weren't prepped the right way, they should have worked harder on that, been more careful.
So I think not only is it framing it to the students, but understanding that there is a certain framework that we as the adults also have to set up, and when they know that it's going to be collaborative, I think that also takes a lot of pressure off of them as well.
Well, coming back to the theater thing, it's making sure that the set is right and the stage is right and the lighting is right and all these other things around it is right, so that all you have to do is step in and be confident in your performance. And I think if you know those things are going to be there for you, that you always fall back and you can always rely on those things being there. So a lot of the things that we're going to talk about are about building that structure and that framework that your team can sink back into and feel confident relying on. But
I do think going into this does take more work on the adult side, I think, than most adults right now are putting it.
I would agree. So if you're an instructor listening to this, if you're a coach listening to this, even if you are a cadet commander, and one of your jobs is to logistically prepare your team, there's going to be a lot of gold in here that I think that will really help you out to set the inspection block up for success when you walk in the room. Especially when you're spending, what, $30, $40, $50, $60,000+ to be at an event, right? So you want this to go well. You want it to not be up to chance as much as you can possibly make it.
And again, I think it's really, really important that we try and make inspections seem as not scary as possible, because going into the first thing about choosing our teams, one of the first things that we look for when choosing our teams is we are looking for people who want to do it.
And I think that's the common thread across choosing teams for pretty much every event, honestly. For pretty much that's the requirement for us when we teach teams, when we're out, we're like, hey, how should you do your quote unquote tryouts, or how do you select people? And people do get that wrong all the time. They try to find the talent, or they try to find the immediate skill level that's in front of them. And really inspection, more than anything else, is about finding the people who want to do it.
And not necessarily people who want to be inspected, but maybe the people who want to take up the challenge, and maybe even people who aren't 100% wanting to do it, but are willing to do the work and get into it.
They're curious about the process. They're curious about, what goes into it, and they're willing to explore that and be a little bit vulnerable.
But it's going to be easier to get people to want to do it if, again, they understand it's not going to be all on me. There's certain things that if I do these certain things, even if we don't finish out on top, as we are going to be in a good place, we're not being set up for failure.
And I want to give an example, and I'm not going to name names. And again, this is just to illustrate how important it is to find people who want to do it, right? So we're in the process of selecting the inspection team. And this was about spring break of last year. And we're auditioning everyone. We're looking for all the traits that we're about to go into on this podcast. And we think, we select people that make logical sense. And one of the seniors came up to us and said, hey, so-and-so wasn't selected on the initial, round to be a primary in that block. They were selected to be an understudy for the block, and he comes up to us and says he really, really, really wants to do it. I think we should strongly consider using this cadet. We said,
and just on the adult side, decision-making wise, this is a student, the one that they wanted to pick, who I believe he was only a sophomore.
less experienced, definitely less trained in the important things: inspection, clarity of voice, confidence and response, being able to speak slowly and clearly.
So he tended to, I don't know, before this process that we'd really heard him speak more than a few words.
So it wasn't like somebody would jump out at you as being like someone who was like gung-ho about it.
I think from the adult perspective, he is somebody you wouldn't affect.
Well, 100%. And so, when the seniors came up to us and said, hey, I think so-and-so really needs to be a part of this, we asked them, said, are they going to do the work? Are they willing to do it? And they said, yeah, I think he'll do it.
Well, and then we also had to ask, because the person that they wanted to replace him with was a junior.
Who had been in the inspection before, who had gone through it in the past.
Marches well, speaks well, handles the rifle well.
By all normal metrics, would be a good fit for an inspection team. And of course, on the adult side, we kind of thought that all those things make sense.
But on the student side, we don't actually know what was going on, but something was going on behind the scenes that made the seniors feel as if that would not be the best match for the team.
And so we talked to that student. We said, hey, are you willing to do the hard work that this is going to take? And absolutely, I'll do it. And they wound up at the end of the day being absolutely 100% just a hero in inspection. I'm like tearing up thinking about it right now. But all that to say is, like, the number one selection criteria is people who want to do it. Now, if you don't have the depth of roster to have the luxury of choosing people who want to do it, right? That may still be the difference maker between, the last person in the inspection team and the understudy.
I would say from there is then you have to go to the opposite end of the spectrum and find out who absolutely just does not want to do it. Do this quietly.
Not because, everyone is different, right? You're not trying to embarrass people and call them out in front who's absolutely terrified. No, go find out and talk to your people and find out. Some people are just mortified by the idea of it. Now, if that would take more than, the minimum required, you can't do that for everyone. But then you would weigh to see who's really maybe who is definitely not a fit for it. And I think this is where people kind of maybe get it wrong, and we try to use inspection as this preparatory tool. I've seen a lot of teams try to choose people that haven't been in it before because they want to use it as an introduction to, like, get them spun up and, like, experienced. And again, at a local level, I can definitely empathize with that and see that. When we're spending, 5-figure money to get to a season-ending competition, we got to be real careful. And I think you're right. Those are the first 2 layers of team selection. So once you have your 12 cadets, plus your cadet commander, plus your 2 door holders, which we'll talk about in a moment, and the door holder selection is also important, then we can kind of figure out how we're going to situate these cadets in the team itself. And this is going to be weird. This is the thing that's going to freak you out, because we're going to say this and you're going to go, no way. And we're going to go, please believe us. And you're going to go, but, and we're going to say, I know.
Okay, if you're listening to this right now when we put it out, it's the end of October. It's about to be November. If you listen to us, you have so much time between now and the end of the season in May that this shouldn't even really be a consideration or something you're worrying about. When we made this selection and did what we're about to tell you to do, it was March.
It was spring break. It was March. It was the second week of March. And it definitely was a scary scenario for, honestly, all of us involved. I think we knew in our gut that this was going to be the right call, but it was kind of nerve-wracking.
It didn't come together until they went into the room.
And the one time that they really nailed it was in the room, and it was magical. And I was like, I've never cried in an inspection before, but as the 4 squad leader nails mark time march exactly like there's a metronome playing, it's just like, oh my God, you finally did it. This is going to be weird, and you're not going to want to believe us. And in fact, we have numerous people who we tell this to and they don't, because I think it's hard. So we're just going to throw it out right in front. Here's what we're going to do. It's a 12 block inspection, unless you're Division 3, in which case we're back to having it. We still haven't, 2-person per 4 squad inspection.
Although you can go to 12, and if you have the people,
we would highly encourage you to do it.
So here's how we would do this first.
Okay, cadet commander selection. Cadet commander selection is not based on who's the most knowledgeable, smart, brainiac cadet, and I think that's where people get this wrong, because in Daytona in specific, the cadet commander does not get any more question than Is your team ready? Are you centered on me? Basic things. They're not getting a knowledge inspection. In other words, their inspection is the entry, the controlling of the team, and the maneuvering out of the room.
So I think what you're looking for, and I think we used to just say it was the loudest cadet.
It is the most mature, presence-filled student. In other words, we want to find someone who both sounds, stands, looks, and acts like a young NCO. And that plays into the physical appearance, that plays into the quality of voice and the volume of their command voice, of course.
And I think this maybe used to be less important whenever they used to just have judges who were experienced. But I think in the current day, especially if it keeps going the way it's been going, is as they bring in judges who are not just experienced, but who went through inspection themselves as
alumni of the competition.
You have judges who are, I think this is a good thing. You have judges who are playing the game a little bit and judges who are doing things to test basically the cadet commander of like, how adjustable are they? How well do they adapt? And so because of that, it's not just the loudest person, but it's also going to, you also want to pick the person who's not going to be easily
flustered. They're not going to be easily broken. They're going to be able to think on their feet. Again, it speaks mainly to the maturity of the commander.
Because I think in the last couple of years, especially like the armed inspection, centering has been a really big thing. And almost 100% of cases, we hear when we talk to teams who are on the armed division, oh, we got just yelled at for, not being centered, and then my commander didn't know what to do, and then they were so flustered, and then they just messed up.
And, we've seen video of it. We've talked to people. And so, yeah, I think that maturity level for the cadet commander is really the adjustability, the ability to create a little bit of margin and space to think when they're under pressure. This is not, again, your brainiac person, but it's the person that's going to have that aura about them that says, I'm not a student, I am a young NCO, and they're going to play that role in the script really, really well. So cadet commander, that's kind of what we think about. This is super important. I don't know that you can overcome having the wrong person in this seat. So really look at your people, and it might be someone you don't expect. Again, it's not about being conventional. It's about fulfilling the role in the script.
Then from there, I think most people would go to the squad leaders or the element leaders.
And we used to tell people, like, put your best marchers as your squad leaders in height order, starting with your first squad leader being your strongest, and then go in height order from there.
We're talking about entry yet, so when we get there, this will make sense. But the next people that we would set are the people who are at the end of your squads or elements.
And these would be people that I think traditionally most teams would make their squad leaders. In other words, they're the seniors. They're the upper class type folks. They're the best drillers on the team. They're the best marchers. Why? Because they've been committed to the team for, 3 or 4 years. They would traditionally go into the squad leader spots. We're going to seat them at the end of each squad.
And what we realized is that when the judges at the, when you're in Daytona Beach are judging you, they don't have the score sheets in their hands, meaning that when they go to score, they're going to be going off oftentimes their last impression.
And so we're going to use that psychology to our benefit. First impression is an important one, but the last impression is going to be the last people speaking and the cadet commander reporting out. And then incidentally, the movement out of the room.
Which again, they're going to see theoretically the end of they're going to see the last person.
The last person before squad and the commander are going to be the people that are the last people in view around. And again, you want these people to be experienced. So in selecting the tail ends of your squads, we find the 4 strongest, most experienced people on the team, period, the end, even if they belong in squad leader spots.
And we found that this worked really well, because what happens is when you get a student in front of you who just is unshakable and speaks well, is what we saw happen this last year, is that it moves the judges out of just like this like drill instructor like mindset to like, it almost lets them have a little bit more fun, and I think it's been a little bit playful.
It engenders the situation where it is a performance, and the judges, because it's so obvious that the cadets are performing for them, the judges perform for the cadets too. And I'll give you a perfect example, because this happened on the tail end of 4 squad with the Air Force judge. At the end of, we're going through the inspection and whatever. We're in the 4th squad, Marine Corps program, 4th squad. We're on the last cadet, I believe. And he's inspecting, and boom, it's question after question. This is a senior. He's the regulation commander, super squared away cadet. Normally would have been a squad leader, but he's on the end of the squad. And the MTI is just firing questions off, and he's just killing it because he's been doing this for a long time and he knows what's going on. The MTI at some point looks over at the squad leader, throws up his hands and goes, are they going to get anything wrong? And the squad leader goes, no, whatever, no, staff sergeant, whatever, master sergeant, no, sir. And we're like, okay, well, that's a bold strategy. We'll see what happens. But it put the judge into this position where they were kind of performatively like being exasperated with the team.
And then likewise, right at the very end, the third squad, the Navy judge, she ended up, even though she ended up talking to the person who was in the middle of the, squad, is because of the way the whole inspection went, is she was able to kind of talk to that middle person when literally she wasn't even in the platoon anymore. She was over on the side, done, and she was still talking and interacting with, and then the last thing they heard was the interaction with her. And it was funny too, because
so, and again, you can go on YouTube, find, this is Kirsten and I, so search up the Woodlands College Park High School Inspection 2024, it'll come up, and you'll see this on video very clearly. So she had him singing, the Marine for him, and then other people had to join in, right? Yeah. So they're all singing, and then this one cadet drops out. And so the judges by this time had moved back over to the side of the room, and she goes, "Cadet, why did you stop singing?" Right? So now the cadet, and this is, again, we'll talk about this in just a moment, but off the top of his head just says, "Ma'am, their chief or whatever, petty officer, this cadet stopped singing because this cadet could not keep up." And she just goes, "Interesting." And that was the final thing.
Well, I think likewise in the first squad, the cadet at the end of the first squad knocked her cover off, right? And so then the head judge hands it over to the commander. But at the end, he ended up, putting her cover back.
He asked permission to her, "Can I put your cover back on?" And she says, "Now who's asking questions of who?" Right?
She didn't say that, but
that's what I'm saying. But she's yes, sir. And he makes a whole big deal about putting it back on, making sure that it was adjusted properly and in regs and all that kind of stuff. And that was their final.
And so I think almost every squad had, a more personal interaction with the judges than we probably have ever seen in any inspection that we've worked with or trained.
I think there's this idea that in inspection, especially in Daytona, that you'll never, quote unquote, you never know how it goes. What do we all say as coaches? You never know, if I thought it was good, it wasn't good. If I thought it was bad, it was good. We never really know, right? This was the first one I sat in where I kind of was sitting there going, no, I know this is good. And I knew it was good because of the attitude of the judge interactions with, and it was all predicated on having experienced people at the end to create that environment, to finish the inspection, put your experienced cadets on the end, which means if we put those people on the end, who do we put as the squad leaders?
Okay, for the squad leaders,
or element leaders,
element leaders, all we're looking for is your loudest people who are left over.
So of the people who are not the most experienced, we want the loudest possible command voices. Like booming can fill up a room, and then all we're going to do is we're going to arrange them shortest to tallest. By the way, the arrangement of the experienced cadets, strongest in first and fourth, and if you can get them height ordered, that would be great. Because height order is going to play a role as we finish this out. You want someone strong in the end of first, that might be the last person inspected. You want someone strong in the end of fourth, that could be the last person inspected. They cascade, and then really go height order. But we're just going to go loudest possible people in height order from shortest to tallest, first squad or element to fourth. This can be kind of nerve-wracking because if you really think about it, having a loud voice and being a good marcher or a good driller or a good rifle handler or a good inspection cadet have literally no correlation whatsoever. Sometimes they're the same, but sometimes they're not.
And in our case, this last year, they weren't.
The first squad leader
was
first year on drill team.
Junior. But was technically, now she had come out her freshman and sophomore year briefly, but other things happened. But this was her first really year on drill team. Our second squad leader, I believe, was a sophomore.
Yes.
Right now, his second year on drill team, but still a sophomore. The third squad leader was a junior who, while he had been around a little bit his freshman year and definitely his sophomore year.
This was his first year basically not being an understudy and being in the main performing groups.
And then the fourth squad leader was a senior, but likewise, it was his first year as a block driller.
Yep. He spent the prior years being an understudy. And, when we proposed this, I think that everyone thought we were crazy because of what we just said. that's not a traditional way to pick your squad leaders. But we had the people with loud voices line up and call mark time, march, squad halt. And we just figured out who was the loudest, and then we put them in height order pretty much.
So in this case, the most experienced person in the squad leader positions was a second-year sophomore.
Yep, that's, when you put it like that, that's pretty unorthodox. But again, quality of command voice.
And we watched. And the reason why we did this is we watched in the inspections, and we watched the only really first, second, and third place inspections, as many as we could find post-COVID and like right before COVID happened. And what we saw was that in a lot of these cases, the squad leaders were not actually that good. They fumbled the rifle.
They ticked out in terms of like being on step or having like misfires and timing. It didn't seem to correlate.
It wasn't that important when you looked and like actually watched other inspections. It wasn't the most important factor, but in almost all the inspections, they had strong last inspection cadets.
And when we watched all the videos together with the College Park students, one of the things that they did point out was how loud all the squad leaders or element leaders were in the top finishing inspection. Like, wow, they're just bellowing, they're going for it. So again, unorthodox, but important, because when we discuss the entry, it'll become key as to why that's so important. And we'll talk about it in practice. We'll talk about how to make sure that they can do that, even if they're not the most skilled or experienced driller in your formation, which they most assuredly will not be because they're on the end of your formation.
And then for the middle students,
it's everyone else that's left in height order from front to rear. And again, talking about the selection criteria like we did, it's just whoever's left, and then just go shortest to tallest, because in the composition of the team, I think for a long time we kind of held that height didn't matter. But part of creating the authentic scenario of the inspection team is having the block look cohesive. Yeah. So we're not going to play games with who's smarter in first squad or who's not in middle squad or whatever. We're just going to go shortest to tallest with whoever's left, and that's going to give you your block.
And then you have to pick 2 additional people, ideally, for car holders.
People get this wrong all the time. Who opens the doors for most teams? It's going to be a parent. It's going to be the instructor. It's going to be another cadet in a polo and shorts.
And honestly, if that's all you have,
that's fine.
Okay.
But
when you do that and you have to have somebody move from the seating area to go scramble to open a door, you are breaking basically the spell. You're breaking
the fourth wall.
Yeah.
Someone from the outside has now come in and become part of the performance in a way that is jarring or disconnected. So what we're going to do is we're going to select 2 people to choreograph their positions to open the door.
Great position for your freshmen, for your new people who like maybe are interested in inspection but don't want to be inspected.
We love this because it gets you in the room. And by the way, we're going to dress them out in a like uniform to the team. They're going to march with the team. They're going to prep with the team. They're going to do everything with the team. They are part of the team. And their part is going to be to get their steps to move from the doorway, from one doorway, closing those doors, to getting in front of the other set of doors to open them. Again, if you go to the video on YouTube, you can see an example of what that looks like. And I'm sure we'll talk through it a little bit in the entry-exit process.
Yeah.
But, it is a great way to get people in the room and participating. And I would always rather have more people participating in the cast than not. So that's team selection. Let's move on to entry and exit.
I think this is really simple at the end of the day, especially once we watched it, especially because we were, lucky enough to, do Nationals drill camp for a long time. So we had an idea of what was being taught at the camp and by the people who are doing the camp. And also through that relationship, then we have good relationships with instructors who have been very successful at inspection. So when we arrived at the conclusion is we had a lot of input to get there.
Yep. And we had those offline conversations and, leaned heavily, I think, for a long time. Okay. In regulation drill and color guard.
Okay, if you know us, if you've trained with us, if you've talked to us,
if you've viewed our content for more than 30 seconds.
We rail really hard on being authentic when doing military drill, meaning we're going back to the manual, we're going back to how it's interpreted, how it's being taught.
What's the point of doing it if we're not going to do it the way that it was intended to be, in the spirit in which it was intended to do?
And we stuck with that. And we really, and that's part of what we were teaching for a very long time. And I think that at the height of when the teams do it as good as they could do it, they are maxing out at third place.
Okay, so Marine Corps team. This is 2 years in a row. This is the first year and the second year with College Park. relying a lot on our previous experience with schools like Lowell and East Paulding, who kind of really pioneered this. All of us coach nerds went and read the manual, like, okay, when it says fall in, which is what we're doing, what do you do? Okay, in the Marine Corps order, the guy double times to their post, taking their steps from the platoon commander, or platoon sergeant. We don't have a guide, so it's the first squad leader. But we can't run in the room, so that's not going to happen. So what happens? Then we cascade in, taking position, furnishing interval in the first squad, everyone else looking to the right to get dressed, looking to the front to get cover. And when interval's been obtained, the arms go down, and that's a fall in. And so what we did was we kind of worked through that in the inspection, sprucing it up and choreographing it suitable to the level of.
And so here's what happened in that first year. What was it? 2022?
Yeah.
We had other friends who did this at
other service events.
And also at National. And I think in 2022, we all kind of got similar good comments. And the judges made comments. Really nice fall in, cool fall in. But it
was a 5th place finish in 22.
Yeah, and I think it's some of the other ones as they finished well. And so we're like, okay, let's go ahead, and now that we feel good about that, we got good comments on it.
Let's sink into it and get good at it.
Well, in 2023, when we did that, this was not just in Daytona, this was also in Ohio. I think we all kind of got similar comments. I'm not sure what happened here, but it was very clear, and
it was a very clear and obvious statement that was not an acceptable way to interpret the fall-in procedures, to the point where at the Ohio event, our other coach
told that it was the incorrect way to enter the room.
And the previous year, they were told they were the only team who properly looked at the time the Air Force manual and interpreted the fall-in correctly.
And this was the same head judge
between both years, and they received 2 markedly different comments. So once we looked at that and we said, you know what? No, this is not going.
Well, and then they went and protested, and then they got the answer was, well, I guess you're right. The SOP doesn't say one way or the other. I guess we should just be more clear in the SOP.
And like Kirsten said, we are the people who are fighting for the soul of let's really do regulation, let's really do color guard the way it's intended.
But I think in this case, when the competition very clearly says
what it expects, we should listen the first time.
And when you're doing something and you very clearly get the response of, what are you doing? This is not what we expect to see, and this isn't what we want to see, then
you should believe it. If someone tells you what they want and then someone tells you what it is, you should probably believe that.
Well, and in this case, unlike regulation, which is done and everybody can see, or exhibition or color guard where there can be an audience, inspection is done in, a corner away from everyone or in a closed door room, meaning that whatever is happening is going to happen.
The only way you're going to see it is videos on the internet. And for the longest time, that wasn't even allowed. And videos were being taken down and get copyright strikes against them. And you only see a portion of it on the Best of series. So you would never see an entire inspection from start to finish.
Well, so we sat down and we said, okay, the competition clearly is not favorable to this. And even if it was, that's when we looked back at the scores, is the best someone is doing is 3rd place.
So
even if the competition was okay for it, people aren't doing that well with it anyway. And so we sat down and said, okay, well, let's go and look at as many of the top teams as we could find.
And what we found was squad leaders across, break off, call the mark time march, call the squad or element halt, send the commander in advance and not with the team. And again, go on YouTube and look, the Woodlands College Park High School inspection. It's exactly the way that we would do it.
Well, and what we realize is it's exactly what's being taught at drill camp. And this is important, is the past few years, at least 2 of the judges who are inspection judges are helping teach at drill camp.
And so it just kind of makes sense.
And that's not a bad thing.
No, it just kind of makes sense. Let's do the thing that's being taught, and it's clearly that the expectation.
And if it's what's being taught, and those 2 people generally are the people who are briefing their inspection teams, then that's what the judges are going to expect. So why try and rock the boat here?
And so we put up our hands and said we weren't doing it the right way. Let's do it this way. Again, you can go see the video. It is the squad leader across break-off entry with the mark time marches, with them calling their squads halt, so as opposed to having the commander halt the entire platoon together. It's the commander going in first, taking their position, taking a small cheat step to their right before they about face, so center on the judge, take a small step to the right because the about face is going to travel you to the left naturally. And when you do this and you see it, you'll see why we didn't get any comments on centering, right?
We've never gotten comments.
Never, ever. Because you have to take the cheat step, or you have to learn to do the about face perfectly in place, which Kirsten claims is possible to do.
You're cheating, but yes.
I have never been able to do it successfully myself. Take the cheat step to the commander, do the about face, draw sword if you're a Marine Corps or Navy program, or then forward march into the room.
And then I think from there, we went and looked at the results for what team was consistently the most successful team at inspection.
And there are 2 contenders for that title. One of them is a Navy team and one of them is an Army team. The Army team being more prevalent in recent years.
Well, and the Navy team, I went to that school, and so we were already doing, in terms of uniform and knowledge, we were already doing most of those things anyway.
And so we just asked the question, like, hey, what are some of the things that are making you successful? And that's when we learned. Send the commander in, send him up to the front post, put him up in, near the front by 1 pace away from the commander, about face, and then march forward from the judge. It's where we learned when you set up in the hallway. And again, I got to give all credit to this instructor who has always been, I'm gonna cry, has always been like super helpful. And he's like, don't put him 40 inches back to chest out there. Get him closer. You can see everyone. You're not going to have to round around the corner. It's going to present a powerful picture. And he even cited something in the training circular that the 40-inch distance would not apply to this specific scenario, being in an extended column formation.
Putting the cadet commander beside the line and not in front of the line.
Not giving the command outside with the head turned towards the formation or facing the formation, but giving the command straight into the room because no one can see you out there.
And in this case, yeah. And, so one, saying the command straight into the room, that way it's loud. When you have the commander then march up to the judge and then get really close, I think it's somewhat startling. And so they're really watching the commander and how confident they are. When you start them in close, it also doesn't matter because we realized until you step into the room, the judges literally can't see you.
And I'm gonna tell the next thing, which hurts both of our hearts. So, in Daytona, when you walk in the room, the chairs are there for the spectators. The judges are up towards the front of the room on the side. They can't see the feet.
Okay, well, so this particular Army team that we're talking about, if you know, tends to pivot with the toe down.
Like the old national style with a hard dig the toe in and
do an extra pause.
And we know that's not how it's described in the training circular.
But here's the thing. The judges cannot see the feet.
But they can see the shoulders. And by going toe dig down
the first
pivot, Kirsten would not. We're like, should we do it on all of them? She's like, you can't.
No, they could see your feet. There are some things that you just cannot give up on. That was one of mine. They did normal pivots after that. They did correct pivots, heel down, rolling forward onto the toe, all of that.
But for that first one, it's about the blocking of the shoulders and really about establishing the robotic cadence.
We just made sure that Sergeant Major was sitting on the corner so they couldn't see past him.
And he's a fairly tall dude, so, obscure the feet. But yeah, we went toe down into that first pivot. Again,
and then everyone going in the room, you don't need to march. You don't need to march until your first step into the room.
You can look down and make sure you're not stepping on someone. You can look down and make sure that your spacing is even as you take your paces into the room. Again, head goes up, game face goes on, 1 step in front of that doorway because that's where they can start to see you. And I think a lot of teams do try to march in the hallway.
But then you get off step, you step on people because there's not really enough.
And especially, honestly, I see it a lot in the unarmed room where you have to line up the corner. You have to line up at like parallel to the room, and every team takes that. I won't say every. Don't take that first pivot. Just walk around the corner.
Around that corner, and then as soon as you hit the doorway, you're marching.
So again, these are things that we had observed and that we had probably subconsciously taken note of, and certainly we've seen before. But it's like when we put it into play with that entry, and again, you can check out the video. That's the entry we would recommend. We're not trying to play games with, well, could it be this or could I protest and get these? No, we're just gonna
do what's being taught,
and
do what the judges are expecting to see, and you're not going to have a problem. And then from there, it's how well do you do it?
Exactly, and then we'll talk about the practice structure as we get kind of now into this. If you are still with us, awesome.
The only things we would say don't call column rights or column lefts.
No extra. It's mark time march, squad halt, mark time march, element halt.
That's it. No extra commands. I know I've seen some Army teams now doing like count off before the
Do not
open ranks.
count off before the open ranks. You would only count off before a movement requiring the numbering. And open ranks is not one of those movements. Would not do that.
Things we've also seen teams do that you could do, but that maybe we wouldn't do, is after someone's inspected, sometimes they have them go to parade rest, or they have the squad leaders call them to parade rest.
When we did see that in some of the top inspections.
If you're going to do that, then you need to start practicing that now and go through every single scenario that could possibly happen. Because in one case, we did see where the squad leader, looked over to the judge and asked permission to do this or that, and then got permission, and that was a really good moment, and they did really well.
And then the college park cadets commented on, that must have been a really strong moneymaker for that team.
We found for us it did not make a difference, and we chose not to go to parade rest because, one, it was March, and two, our squad leaders were not super experienced and did not have a lot of time.
And we didn't see, I don't think, any adverse effects from not doing
So if you're going to do that, we're not going to tell you not to do that.
But it's one of the things at the top. Just be careful and practice and rehearse.
And you've got to go through what happens if you forget. What happens if you do this?
What happens if you're facing the wrong direction when the inspection is concluded because that inspector has put you at about face and now you're at parade rest backwards? What happens then? You know what I mean?
So just make sure if you're going to do that, go through all the different scenarios. We personally did not do it. And probably if we were training a team...
I don't think that we would recommend this, but we also wouldn't tell you that's like a game changer.
You just have to practice all the different scenarios of what could happen if it doesn't go exactly like you expect it to.
Yeah. So that's a little bit about the entry and exit. Next, let's talk about practicing inspection. Then let's go to talking about the actual conduct of the personnel inspection. I think entry and exit goes along with the conduct. And I am going to... While we start talking about this, I'm going to pull up here because I have it, the exact practice plan, which I will eventually read for you in terms of how we worked this at an average practice.
Okay, right now, if you're listening to it right now or in the next week, we're at the beginning of November, you have plenty of time, and I would start early. We started this in March, and so we had to do this every single day from the time that we got off of spring break until we were literally in Florida still doing this. And I think that took away from time that we needed in some of the other events.
It absolutely did. If you started this now and went once a week or twice a week now, when we get back from Christmas break and we're on second semester,
you could probably keep going once or twice a week from now all the way there and be fine.
And then when you get into rehearsal mode that month out or whatever, now you're doing it every day anyway because you're in rehearsal mode. It's a whole different thing.
For us, we never got to rehearsal mode with this one, and so it was consistently taking 30 minutes at least of practice.
Yeah, so I'll read this out to you, and then I'll explain kind of each step. So 5 minutes of squad command practice, which was breaking off into squads, putting the metronome on, and having them march around, taking a column left, right, because it's column left march to go up the room, and then a column right march, and then calling mark time march, squad halt on the metronome. And we literally, it was like little snakes, just 4 little snakes wandering around. All they're doing is taking column lefts and the column rights and practicing commanding mark time march, squad halt. What is the purpose? We're getting on the met, we're getting the feet dialed in. We'd add in order arms on and left face. So again, we're practicing what the actual inspection is going to be. So we did that for about 5 minutes in a typical scenario of just snaking around, getting the feet good, getting the voices warmed up. Then for another 5 minutes or so, we would switch to open and close ranks practice, but this is still split apart. We're not forming a platoon. The squads are now doing open ranks march. They're going through their procedures per your service. Ready front cover for the Marine Corps, ready front, dress right dress for the Army, and then ready front for the Army, add that in. And they're just doing it as sticks of 3 or Division 3 case, maybe 2 people together.
Well, again, and we had to do this specifically because I forgot to mention when we were talking about staffing, 2 of the people who were in our inspection block joined the team in March during spring break. 2 juniors.
And it was so cool because they came out to spring break camp because they were interested in being on the inspection.
But these juniors were year 0 in that they had never been on the team at all.
No rifle handling. Literally had not touched a drill rifle until we got to camp and we said, hey, we're interested. We said, okay, someone teach them how to do port arms, please.
So part of why we had to do open and close ranks and part of our practice, which we probably wouldn't have had to, maybe
less, maybe just a couple of rounds.
5 minutes, was because we had 2 cadets in there who didn't know open ranks and close ranks in the way that we were doing it with the rifle.
So for them, it was a lot about learning and getting comfortable and getting the
And so
reps
they
in.
needed that whole month and a half of doing the drill.
For the other ones, it was about like, when we put our arms up and dress right, can we make our alignment absolutely spot on perfect? And so they were getting the time to really, as a squad or as an element for our Air Force friends, really getting the time to sink into getting comfortable with each other and their step sizes. What's one step feel like for you versus you? So we did that for about another 5 minutes or so. Again, if you have more experienced people and you didn't throw 2 people in spring break, that's probably not going to take quite as long. We would do 2 entry and exits. That means you're setting up in the gate from the time the commander calls the team to attention and port arms, and then they march into the room through the time that the team is filing out of the room. We would consider that an entry and an exit run. They do open ranks, close ranks, all that. No full reports, anything like that. We would do it with the metronome on. And again, metronome on. You cannot, if you follow our content, if you've trained with us, I don't even know how you do a drill team practice without a metronome anymore. It's impossible. Metronome on. Because what we're looking for is, can we nail all the components that we worked on in small groups? Can we nail them cohesively? And can we do it in time? Part of getting the entry and the exit to feel like it's at a performance grade level is making it feel like it's not 5 movements that are just assembled together like functionally, but it's one flowing piece of choreography punctuated by the proper regulation command. And so the metronome is going to do that for you. Then we go met off and we do one full run through with the gate procedures to include somebody pretending to be the judge, bursting open the door, they say boom or whatever, the door holders pretending to grab the door, and the cadet commander doing the interaction, signing the clipboard. I will tell you, for all of our cadet commanders, I don't know that this made a point difference, but it was certainly a fun thing for them, maybe hopefully a helpful life thing. We went online and we got, there's those sites that'll do like calligraphy style signatures, customized signatures. We got all of the commanders' customized initials. So when they went to put the initials on the score sheet, they had repped out, because they give you like templates and they give you a little video showing you how to do the pencil strokes or whatever. Like, they put down their initials like they put down their initials 1,000 times, because in that full run through, we just had a scratch sheet of paper and they're putting the initials down. If you listen to us talk about rehearsal, if you've trained with us, it's everything that could happen in the real scenario. We're just trying to get that out there. So that's the full run through. We're going top to bottom, no met. Film it, of course, review it, of course, come back the next day and improve on the things that you saw. That's really how we practiced the drill portion of the inspection. Small group, big group on the met, take the met off, performance run through, going top to bottom, full production run. And, like Kirsten said, that probably took us about 25, 30 minutes, but only because we had to spend more time on the individual work. For most teams who have, not brand new people in them, this can be a 15 to 20 minute process that you just do a couple of times a week. And then you can easily do every practice before you get on the plane or the bus or whatever when you're in rehearsal mode. So I think that's pretty cut and dry. That's literally all we did. If somebody needed help with rifle manual or help with inspection arms or whatever, they of course worked with someone they felt comfortable with, on the side or between, practice or in class or what have you when they had time. All that stuff like normal drill team practice applies, but the structure of snake around, work on the voices, open ranks, close ranks, entry on the met, exit on the met, full run through, that's pretty much the practice process. Was there anything else that we have to add about that? That's pretty much.
Honestly, start early is my biggest thing. We probably needed more time in that last month and a half than we had. Start doing 1 or 2 times a week now. Even if this is not your set block and you're trialing people in and out to figure out who, goes in, is start working on it now. That's my only thing about that.
And again, between picking the right people to be in the right places and practicing the right way and using the right entry and exit, these are the things that when it's a tough situation that you're in because you're in the heat of the battle, like Kirsten talked about the framework, these are the things you fall back to. And the next thing that we're going to talk about is literally going to be, again, we looked at the videos. This is another one of those framework things that I think if you followed these rules, every cadet in your formation could always fall back on these rules. And so this is concerning the conduct of the actual inspection. And this is whether it's armed or unarmed or whatever. But of course, I'll include the information about, doing inspection arms and all that kind of stuff. So I'm just going to go through, because this is, again, what we do with the schools when we're talking to our clients who attend this meet. I am just going to tell you everything that we told them and in fact put in writing and became kind of the rules for response in the inspection phase. What we told them is that, okay, it's kind of like learning a second language, or maybe for some of us learning a third language. If you want to become fluent in the language, you have to practice and think in that language. In other words, there can't be a moment where you intake information, translate that information into the proper format or the different language in this case, and then turn it around. We want to use these rules as a way to think about every question that we answer in our everyday lives. So when you're sitting in math class and the teacher asks, what's, 2 plus 2, the answer that you give is not 4. The answer that you give sits within the framework of the rules that we're about to talk about. In other words, your brain it doesn't have to translate. It just thinks that the answer is, ma'am. The answer to the question, what is 2 plus 2 is 4, ma'am. Like, you are just constantly thinking in that's the answer format that you think in. So these are the rules. These are the guidelines. These are very straightforward and very simple. So here we go. First and foremost, slow everything down, period. Very much like stage makeup, but if you've ever been to a theater production, when you see stage makeup up close, it looks almost ridiculous. You very much, and then when you see it from the stage and you're in the seats, it's like, oh, it looks like a normal thing. You're going to slow down past what seems normal to do. When you slow your rate of speech, you will slow your rate of breathing. When you slow your rate of breathing, you will slow your heart rate. So everything goes slower than you think it needs to go. At practice, almost to the point of being comical. But when you perform, it's not going to seem nearly as silly as it feels when you're, especially when you're first starting out. It communicates assuredness, right? Number 2, if you're an arm team, inspection arms must be as slow or slower than your greeting. So if we're slowing everything down, good morning, sir. Cadet Second Lieutenant Wendling is prepared for inspection. If I go faster than I just spoke on my inspection arms, it communicates what? Nervousness. Being unconfident, right? You must commit to doing the inspection arms at the cadence of or slower than what you sounded off with.
Now, when you're entering the room and you're doing order arms and all the rifle manual before that or after that, the rifle manual should be at the same speed as when you're marching.
But when you're doing this is concerning the conduct of the individual inspection, we're slowing everything down. But again, it's going to give you that control. It's going to give you that snap. It's going to let you, again, slow down your heart rate, slow down your breathing, therefore slow down your...
It's also going to mean you're less likely to fumble the rifle. When you're going to order, you're going to have time to get your toe-to-toe correct.
Yeah. Okay, so this is concerning the answering of questions. Now, there's 2 possibilities for the answer you're about to give. Either it is a short answer, i.e., what color is the grass, cadet? Or it's a long answer, i.e., what do you plan to do after you graduate high school? That'd be a longer answer probably, right? So if it is a longer response, it's going to have more, it's not just going to be 1 or 2 words. We're going to group our answer into phrases, and we're going to punctuate those phrases by adding a pause between each phrase. So give me an example. If the question was, what do you plan to do after you graduate high school? I might say something like, sir, after high school, this cadet plans to attend Illinois State University and major in English secondary education, sir. So I take each one of these chunks of information and I give it its own phrase, right? And I'm going to craft through that phrase. I'm going to push a little bit and I'm going to pause. Now, if it's a shorter question, we're going to punctuate every word. So if the question is, what color is the sky, for example, you might say, sir, the color of the sky is blue, sir. So instead of breaking it up into phrases, we're going to break it up at the word level, right? So the longer the response, the more we break phrases. The shorter the response, the more we break words. Again, this communicates well-rehearsed thought. This communicates very confident delivery. And then this is going to be a weird one because if you listen to speech experts talk about speech, this is going to be the opposite of what they will tell you to do. But in watching the videos, this was almost a uniform trait of most of the top finishing teams. You are always going to end your phrases by inflecting your pitch up and never down. Now, speech folks will tell you inflecting down communicates finality. We don't want to inflect up so much that it becomes a question. Sir, the color of the sky is blue, right? We want to go up an inflection because it communicates the end of your thought. If you drop down, there may be more coming after it. We want to communicate. We want to go up. So, sir, whatever the rank is, that's going to go up. We want to communicate that we are done, and we want to have a verbal cue that we're finished talking. A lot of the times you see inspection cadets go and you're not quite sure when they're done. You need to put up basically an exclamation point on it. The way that we do that is to inflect up. That's what we do when we use exclamations anyway. You want to use a volume in your response that is your maximum volume without introducing any scratching or scratchiness or yelling quality. That's going to take personal practice. Get where no one can hear you and find your natural resonant pitch. Go to the point where your voice sounds scratchy, then back off one click. It's very, very important because if we practice at the scratchy or screamy level, we're going to lose the clarity. And the problem with screaming your whole heart out is that while it may communicate motivation, it may also communicate nervousness. So we want to show that we're in control. We're being loud on purpose and intentionally. We're not just being as loud as we humanly possibly can. That's got to be very, very clear. The proper response when you need to stop and start over is as you were. Do not say as you were in the Daytona inspection room. Half the services get very confused, despite the fact that this is literally part of their procedure for canceling the last thing that came out of your mouth. They get, as I was, really? As I was? How about as you were? It's but that's what I'm supposed to say. Permission to correct myself. Permission to restart. Permission to start over. Certainly no as I was, because that's not a real thing anywhere in any manual. And definitely not any as you were. Just ask for permission. The same thing with when you don't know a question, just say you don't know. Sir, this cadet does not know.
Period.
We don't want to say, sir, this cadet does not know, but we'll research the answer to your motivated question and return to you in 3 to 5 business days with the correct response. Sir, no, shut up. That's not going to happen. They don't want to hear it. You're not going to do it. Don't try to fake it. Just tell them you don't know. And when they say, why don't you know? There's only 2 possible responses. One is no excuse. And the other is if you're a Navy program and they asked you where Maxwell Air Force Base is and you say, sir, the location of Maxwell Air Force Base is not in this cadet's course of instruction, sir, that's pretty much the only options you have. So again, no, does not know, but we'll find out. Does not know, but we'll research the question. Just tell them you don't know. Move on with life. And hopefully when we talk about studying here in a moment, you won't have to tell anybody that you don't know anything because you'll have done the hard work to avoid that. So I think that takes care of the rules for response. That is definitely one of the frameworks that all of our students fall back on. And kind of going back to that one who was super motivated but didn't quite have the vocal clarity that you would want right off the bat for an inspection cadet. I think using this process and practicing this and going through it, after we got done with Daytona, first of all, he spoke many more words to us than I think I had ever heard him speak.
Well, he had, at the start of this, he had a relatively thick accent that made it somewhat hard to understand him.
By the end, very clear. Very, very, very clear. Is extreme vocal control. And again, it's that framework that you can sink back onto, that you know that when you get asked a question, these are the checklists of things that I'm going through in my brain.
And I think it's going to be really important, especially, I'm Hispanic and a girl. And so I know sometimes when I get hyped up, I can speak very, very quickly and it can be hard to understand me. If you've got basically a team where there are accents or maybe you have a lot of girls, this is a really important process to go through because speaking quickly,
unfortunately,
does not necessarily communicate excitement.
Though it may be that you feel motivated.
It usually just communicates nervousness, and then the faster you speak, the more likely you are to stumble on your words, which if you stumble on your words, if you lose volume, that basically also shows nervousness, but it also makes you seem less competent and less capable.
Which is, again, in no way, shape, or form the truth, but we're not functionally doing an inspection. We are performing the role of confident young NCOs.
And so for a lot of us, this is something we have to practice.
And I will say, even for myself, just coaching this and teaching this, it does change the way that you enunciate. It changes the way you speak, and it does provide a lot of clarity to kind of how you respond to things. And this is, something that is probably a really helpful skill in life in general. You know, you probably you won't be in a job interview and stumbling over your words if you commit to this framework of we're going to slow things down, we're going to punctuate them right, we're going to think about how we're responding. So that only leaves the last piece of the puzzle, because we're not going to talk about uniforms in this pod. That's probably a whole different podcast.
The only thing we'll say, this is very easy. Don't do your individual uniforms. Do them as a team. Bring your uniforms in. If this is for all service nationals, bring them in a month before.
Work on them every day as you can get the chance to.
Sort everyone into teams. Let each team be individually responsible for each piece of the uniform, and have one person at the end checking it over.
So many checklists. Check when it comes in. Check when it's finished. Check when it's been double checked. Check when it's loaded. Check when it's on the truck.
It doesn't matter if it's technically right if it looks different, because the judges aren't going. They're not supposed to touch you. They're not going to have measuring devices. There's no way for them to physically check whether or not you're right.
But they will see the level of effort and the process of the preparation and the refinement of it.
So the only thing we tell you is don't do it individually. At this point, you have spent all year doing your own individual uniform for a grade once a week.
And again, we're talking about a contest that costs like 5 digits to attend. We're gonna use a process that makes sense. This could be an entire 2-hour thing about uniforms and hygiene. The hygiene piece real important. But again,
just don't do your own uniform.
Yeah, that was the bottom line. And that only leaves us with studying for inspection. I bet if you're listening to this, if you've made it this far, and we've been going for about an hour, if you're here to know how to study inspection, it's probably because you have a packet. Everyone's got a packet. It's probably because no one's actually studying the packet, or if they're doing it on the bus on the way to the meet.
Well, here's the thing. You're going to have probably 2 to 3 nerds on your team
who are going to memorize the packet, and in fact already had it memorized before you handed it out.
If you're those nerds, that's not an insult. That's great. I was one of those people, right?
I was not.
But with the way school is today, now I think when I went to school, like if you were in the advanced classes, it was an AP class or a dual credit class. The amount of stuff, like when we go to schools today, like the amount of options, and the AP classes weren't like AP French, AP Japanese, AP like Mandarin, and like some of these like obscure like things that people.
No, it's like AP English, AP US history.
Like the amount of options, and with the way how competitive it is to get to college nowadays, the amount of like
the workloads changed post-COVID in an effort to catch up and counteract.
Well, now it's like the IB and like the like AP, and then like the career path things plus. Like when we were in New York and talking to some of the students at Francis Lewis, and they were like talking with their career counselors about I was like, oh my, like that.
No, that was an option.
No, like that, like it was relatively simple when I was in high school, and it's only just gotten more complicated, and there are more options since then. It's honestly the amount of the questions that you're probably going to get asked. There aren't like a bajillion questions.
And remember, these are 12-minute time hacks, and that includes getting in and getting out.
Like, there are some really specific, and the SOP, I think, does a really good job, and we pattern the questions off of those categories.
It tells you, like, military knowledge, first aid, service knowledge, like, yes, we should have a packet, and yes, we should study the packet, but honest to goodness.
You can probably narrow it down, the scope of questions down really specifically, and I think we nailed it, because I don't know that we got very few questions wrong this year. In both the Marine Corps Nationals and the All-Service Nationals.
Yeah. And I think...
But anyway, that's beside the point. What I was getting at is, with the workload and the school load that students have today, I think, honestly, it's unrealistic and unfair to ask to take that extra time to study questions.
You're already studying bio, you're already studying chem, you're already studying English.
When you do the study packet, they should have the study packet. I'm not saying don't do the study packet.
Not having said throw away your snuff.
No, don't do that. You're going to use the study packet to do this, but I think it's the scope is so wide in that case that they're really wasting their time.
Let me ask you. Your inspection packet that we patterned the college park inspection
like 50 pages.
And it's, what is it? It's every question that's ever been asked that's been documented on a video, right? Every question.
Here's the thing. I spent 4 years studying that. 4 years studying that packet. And in my senior year...
What'd you get asked?
It was something about the Constitution. And all I can remember is that he asked my squad leader and the person next to me questions that I knew they're questions for those people. I knew every question they got asked. And then it was an opinion-based question about the Constitution. It wasn't even like about the Constitution itself.
So, not in your packet?
No, and then whenever they were doing like color guard inspection, he didn't ask me any questions about the flag, and I knew which way it hung over the street and which way the Union Jack was supposed to be and all the sizes, and if it was a funeral, which way was this or that. And all the thing, he only told me that my toe-to-toe was off. That was it. And I was so deeply, it's been 11 years now, going on 12 in this season. I'm still deeply offended by that.
Spend all the time studying and don't get asked a random question?
No. So I'm saying, like, if you going off of just the study packet, I think is way too wide. So the scope, and so therefore that's really taking time away that they really can be using for their school. And instructors, well, they're not studying for. You can't assume that, and you can't put that on them. And if they are, it's just one more thing that they don't need added to their plate.
But here's my thing: if they were gonna do it, they do it. And if they're not doing it, then we can either be upset they're not doing it, or we can do something different.
Well, and if you're not gonna do something different because they're already not doing it, is you're wasting your money.
Okay. So I'm going to be very real. This is for the coaches and for the instructors out there. I'm going to be very real with you. We've run into instructors before who say, well, that's on the kiddos. If they didn't do it, that's not my fault. Send us your $30,000. Send us your $50,000, because to put it back on them in such a way is not probably teaching the lesson that we hope.
And here's the thing. If you use this, and we're going to talk about it, and it's not going to take that long, so this should be a relatively short piece here at the end. It's not that hard. It's very little extra work on you or them if you do the method we're about to talk about. And honestly, it builds a really good rapport between you and the team. It becomes really fun.
It's one of my favorite, I think, like laugh about it kind of memories as a coach.
It is going to give them life skills that they're going to be really good at thinking on their feet and following the through line and like not getting flustered in the rest of their life.
And I think that's it. I think if you thought the inspection, especially in Daytona, if you thought it was about getting questions right or wrong, then you would do one thing, such as memorize a packet. If you thought it was about finding the through line of the judge's question and riding that wave together with the judge, then you would not go for scope. In other words, the number of questions you could memorize. You would go for, instead, depth. How far can I ride a through line on a singular question until the point where I exhaust the other performer, the judge? I exhaust them of their questions, either by virtue of they ran out of time, or they throw up their hands and they say, are you going to get anything wrong?
And we've kind of always been on that train. Like, we've always told people that, if it's the president, say the middle initial. That way they'll ask you what the middle initial is, right?
Tricks,
don't say your rank, because then you
should. So by the way, we've abandoned that. Do say your rank.
Correct.
in the I don't know. Again, the idea was that maybe they would ask you, and sometimes they would ask you what your rank is, but also
like we've always been on the thing of like leading information in your response so that they might ask you a question.
But this goes one step beyond that. So here's how we tackled this.
Okay, one, while they should study, we took the need for them to study realistically off their plate.
As far as like, it's not going to be a burden on their school day or schedule. Instead, we went one question a day. Now, how do you decide to do this question? Really kind of depends on your communications on your team. We had a Discord server where all the instructors and the coaches were in every channel with every cadet. And so we use the Discord as a means of distributing this question.
You may, if you can't use Discord, and that's fine, because some schools won't let you, rightfully so.
Whatever, we've heard people using GroupMe. We get people using Band app.
You can do this you write the question at the end of the day or at the beginning of the day, and maybe they have to come find you.
30 seconds. We can go back to the old school funny tips and tricks. The question of the day. Before they turn their rifle in, they have to answer the question or whatever.
During lunch. Passing period, the beginning or end of their...
And whoever they report to just keeps a checklist of who did it. And again, the stress, before we get into this, this was not a punitive system. In other words, if you didn't participate, you didn't get in trouble or lose... I don't even know. People do like strikes and then you're off the team or some nonsense.
The people we had wanted to do inspections, so we didn't have this issue.
That is true. That's a good point. So, one question a day. The question goes out on the communications platform. They answer the question. And we had to set up like a game. You don't have to do this, but here's how we did it. When they responded, you got 1 point just for participating. If you answered the question at all, even with a singular word, you got a point. You got another point for the correct format, typing it out in the correct format. You got another point for the correct answer. You got a bonus point if instead of typing your answer back, you did a voice recording and sent it as a voice memo of you saying it. And a lot of them, you could tell they were like doing it at home over dinner because like they do it quietly, be like, sir, the blah, blah, blah. Blah, blah, blah. It's really funny to listen to.
But our one who was working on his voice and his pronunciation did it
every single time was a voice memo. I'm going to cry again because like literally every response and every question. So you ask the difference. Then you don't stop there. Instead of saying, okay, well, that's the question of the day and leaving it at that, you go one level deeper and then you go one level deeper. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to create the through line where there is never a question and answer and done. Because in Daytona, let's be real, it's never a question and answer.
The judges are good and they have been good. I will say post-COVID, I think the judges have done a really good job.
Some of the best inspections that I've seen since I was there in 2006.
I think it helps that the people who are running the inspection rooms did it themselves as high schoolers and they seem to really like it and enjoy it.
Yeah, I gotta be real. That it's been very good. And then, so they know there's a through line. So instead of just saying, well, what's the question? Here's the answer. We train the brain to assume that there's always one level deeper.
Well, and the fun thing is, as we go through this, just so you know, is if they don't know the answer to the question, their job, they cannot say that in this system, there's no I don't know.
They have to go online, type it in, and look it up. Now, again,
or if they can find it in your books, their job is they have to go somewhere.
And research it and come back with an answer. Now, again, we were talking about people who want to be on the inspection team. And I'm going to be real here, we had a moment where people started to share the answers with each other as a way to kind of like shortcut the system. And we finally sat everyone down and we're like, do you remember why we're doing this? You're not doing this as an obligatory thing. Why are we doing this? Oh, it's to get us ready for data. So who are you really cheating when you just copy an answer from a friend and copy paste it? Oh, well, I guess I'm cheating myself. And when you don't look it up, when you just copy and paste, when you don't go and look it up yourself, who are you affecting? Oh, well, I'm really affecting myself. So you got to remember, this is a process for people who want to be there.
But here's an example. So one of the things that sometimes happens if the weekend is late enough is sometimes national or all service happens over the Kentucky Derby.
Yep, common first weekend in May scenario.
Right. So let's say the question that day was what significant sporting event is happening on May 4th?
Sir, ma'am, the significant sporting event happening on May 4th is the Kentucky Derby.
So then my follow-up question is, what are other names that this event goes by?
Oh, well, I'm not sure about that, so I got to go look that one up. Okay.
In this case, the answer is it goes by the Run of the Roses. Okay, well, why does it go by that? Was my next question. And then it's the winner's awarded a blanket of roses. And then I said, how many roses are in the blanket? And then apparently there's 564 roses. I
learned a lot in this process.
And then, well, what's special about this last Kentucky Derby was that it was the 150th anniversary, right? So then the questions the next day had to do with the Triple Crown, and then from there it was, okay, what is the Triple Crown? What races make up the Triple Crown? How many Triple Crown winners are there?
Who's the most recent?
Who's favored to win it? From there, who's the most famous Triple Crown winner?
And I think the thing that this does, and I think the thing that's most important about studying for inspection, especially in the all-service scenario, is that you are always trying to be one step deeper than you're probably going to be asked.
Well, and again, you as the inspector can just, okay, well, whatever comes to your mind next of that ask that question. You know, the very first thing we ever did was, because first aid.
What are the basic life-saving steps? And they were all like, what? Stop the bleeding, start the breathing.
Start the breathing.
Start the bleeding.
Stop the bleeding, start the breathing, protect the wound, treat for shock.
Okay, great. Then you throw the scenario at him. Okay, well, I've cut my leg in the woods. What are you going to do? Well, sir, this cadet would do blah, blah, blah. Okay.
But stop the bleeding. Okay, how are you going to stop the bleeding?
So this cadet would use a tourniquet. Okay, what would you use as a tourniquet?
Okay, well, first I'm going to use my shirt and I'm going to try and, stem the flow. Okay, well, that's not enough. The cut's big enough. I'm bleeding through your shirt. What do you do now?
And you just keep walking down this line. And eventually, it's fun because eventually it's like, well, this cadet would get on their cell phone and call 911. Oh, you're in the woods and you don't have cell signal and it's dead. What are you going to do now? And eventually, it gets to the point where some of them were like, sir, I apologize, you've died.
Right, where some of them, throw them over his shoulder and carry him till they find, a road and can wave someone down.
But the thing about it is, you are always going further into the line of questioning. And you're always thinking, it kind of makes you like a smart aleck about things to where you always have one more last word about the question.
Well, there's some really relevant things for everyone, right? As the Space Force is, the newest service. So you should make sure that everyone on the team
What's the
knows
order of precedence for the services?
what happens during a time of war.
How does that change?
Why is the,
Why is the Marine Corps above the Navy when the Navy technically was, before the Marine Corps? So you just walk down the line of questioning, and you can do this with any piece of knowledge.
what's the UCMJ? What are the different types of, penalties that you can have? What are the, go through and look, because we found, for the Marine Corps, going to Marine Corps Nationals, we found a document that of knowledge they're supposed to know going through boot camp.
And so we pattern the questions off of all of those things.
And at Marine Corps Nationals, they pretty much got down the line, those lists of questions, because guess what? Those DIs are training recruits.
And those recruits are expected to know things from this particular doctrine.
And then when the students did, they also won the Marine Corps National Inspection the last 2 years when they did that.
So I think the biggest takeaway for the inspection studying piece is, one, take the packet, yes, but take it on there.
It's about to be November. If you start this right now,
you could go much further in scope than we did.
I would do one topic a week, pick one question from that topic every day, and then have a set of follow-along questions, 3 to 5.
They go along with it. The expectation is, if you don't know the answer, to look it up. Figure out a way to effectively and efficiently do this, whether it's a communication platform, whether it's somehow in person with checklists. Again, you're going to have to create.
It doesn't just have to be knowledge, right?
May the 4th is what? Well, first of all, I learned but when we asked the question, what's significant about the 4th of May, which is the weekend of the competition, right? I learned about many, many, many historical foreign events, and none of them are Star Wars Day.
Right now, your judges are elder millennials or straight up just millennials.
That's me.
Right? The staple of a millennial is Star Wars. We are some of our personnel, Star Wars, Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, right? For your nerds who are millennials, that's one of the staples of, we can all tell you something about all of it.
So we eventually got down the line, and you find out, okay.
Well, what we found out is these Gen Z, Gen A kiddos, most of them had never even seen Star Wars.
So when you hit them with, what's the proper order to watch the franchise in?
They're like, I don't even know.
I've never seen Star Wars to begin with.
Okay, we'll go look it up.
And some of them did go out and spend the weekend, they watched Star Wars movies.
Well, and then they look it up, and there's an argument. Do you do it in release order or
chronological order?
And there's an argument for both. We're not getting into that right now. We made them look it up and have an argument for it. And even though they didn't get asked, there were other teams that did get asked. Boo. Right? But it doesn't always have to be super serious.
It's less about training on the knowledge. The knowledge is you will passively absorb the knowledge.
Well, that's the thing is, I don't know. It's not the end of the world. Okay, you don't know. Go look it up and then come back with an answer. I'm going to ask you the next question. You don't know that one? Well, go figure it out.
And
right?
in doing that process.
Well, and this is what I learned, because in the Navy system, you have to do academic tests. That was one of our things, is we would take our test. And then if you missed a question, you had to go look it up in whichever NS book it was. And the thought process was, in going and finding the answer, you're going to read other things.
And you'll osmosis those things into your database.
Then one of those other things might be one of the things that you get asked. And then the more you know about a topic, the more comfortable you are. The more comfortable you are, the less likely you are to stumble or make a mistake.
Now you can focus on the craft of... This goes both ways. When you're comfortable with the knowledge, you can focus on the craft of delivery, which is the framework that we talked about before. When you're comfortable with the framework, you have the freedom to access the knowledge that's in your head as a result of studying.
And then again, there's not a lot of stress, because then because I think in this one, doing this way is you spend a lot of time in the knowledge, and you spend a lot of time with it. And so you get really familiar with it. And so then there's not fear about whether or not you're going to know the answer, because you've thought about it. You've spent time going down the line of questioning that has to do with it. It's almost like you're always going to learn something better when you get to teach it.
It's very much that way. It's very much
even though you're not teaching it, is you're exploring it. By going through this and exploring the topic, is you're really getting to intimately know it.
The framework for just learning is what we're talking about here.
But this is what I used to learn things.
And I think in doing that, this changes the nature of the study process. It makes things smoother. It takes it extends it from cramming on the bus and going very surface level knowledge to taking a long time, taking a whole year, taking the whole second semester to get into these questions, to get the confidence behind it. I think
the biggest thing when you do this, if you're the person who's going to be asking questions, is why questions. Why is it called? What are other names for the Kentucky Derby? Why?
You know what's so funny? Literally read the SOP. And for all the quirks of the SOP, one of the things that it does say, and I can picture this, it says, and it might be followed up with, and why.
Well, because again, every time the student has to go through the why, they're learning that first fact more. And so even if there's not follow-along questions, they're more likely to not miss those things.
So, if you've made it with us on this journey.
Oh, sorry. One more thing. Last thing is, so one of the things, because like if you were a Navy Marine Corps, you have 11 general orders, and I asked them, I said, what type of study methods or like mnemonic devices do you use to learn this? And they were like, what's a mnemonic device? So the other thing is, don't assume that the students are good learners or have good learning strategies.
Especially not post-COVID, when everything shut down and our learning process was disrupted.
And so one of the things that I gave them was like, the first thing you do, the first order is this. The second order, 2 legs, 2 eyes, 2 ears, walk by post. And so also in some of these things that are just straight up memorization, ask them what things they're using to memorize, because they may be having nothing that they're using, and you may have really good tools to use. And then again, now you're part of now it's a conversation between the two of you, and this is where the confidence and trust builds up between you and the team.
And I think that's so important, as we wrap this up, speaking to the adults, again, the instructors, the coaches, is you have the opportunity to build up that student and build up their confidence by providing them the scaffolding to really be confident and successful in their role when they walk into the
You can't inspect for them, right? You can't inspect for them. You can't take their place, but this is how you can participate and be a part of the process.
Well, and in doing that, you create the ability for them to walk in and feel like it's no big deal. It's a performance. It's military drill theater. And my role in the play is just to be this super squared away, got an answer for everything, know how I'm going to deliver that answer. That's going to be where I do my job. And I think in going through this, it really does give you the opportunity to make this event worthwhile. There's a lot of things that are wonky about inspection, but this is, I really feel like, and I've always felt like inspection is one of those events where the life lessons and the things you can walk away with are going to be there. And so hopefully this was very helpful in giving you some ideas in terms of how to approach specifically this inspection. If you have questions, if you have what abouts or how would I's, you can find us, leave us a comment, find us on social media, find us on our website, jrtcdrillteamtraining.com, and we will be back with you next time. Thank you for being with us, and we'll see you out there.